The dry, dust-laden wind of the Chihuahuan Desert swept across the red sandstone hills of Albuquerque, New Mexico, rattling the clay roof tiles of the Mediterranean estate on the Sandia foothills. Inside, the cool air smelled faintly of cedarwood and old parchment. 74-year-old Alistair Montgomery sat in his leather-bound armchair, his long, weathered fingers turning the page of a century-old volume of Southwestern property law. Alistair was a retired state probate and real estate judge. For nearly 4 decades, he had presided over the 8th Judicial District, untangling complex land titles, exposing forged deeds, and settling the venomous squabbles of greedy heirs. His eyes, a piercing steel gray, retained the sharp analytical brilliance of a veteran jurist. Over his lifetime, through meticulous property investments and a lifetime pension, he had built a clean $950,000 estate, fully structured inside an irrevocable living trust designed to protect his widowed daughter, Helena, and her 2 teenage children. A soft knock sounded at his study door, followed by the entrance of his son-in-law, Tristan. Tristan was 37, a slick former luxury car salesman who now spent his days wearing tailored linen suits and obsessively checking offshore sports betting apps on his phone. Tristan owed $150,000 to illegal bookies in Las Vegas, a debt that was fast approaching its hard enforcement deadline. "Afternoon, Judge," Tristan said, flashing a quick practiced smile that didn't reach his hollow, restless eyes. He set a steaming porcelain mug of chamomile tea onto the mahogany desk. "Helena said you were feeling a bit tired after your walk. I brewed this specially for you. Has a touch of local lavender to help you sleep." "Thank you, Tristan," Alistair replied smoothly, his deep, resonant baritone echoing softly in the high-ceilinged room. He didn't touch the mug. "How are your sports analytics projects progressing?" "Great. Just dynamic, Judge," Tristan lied, his thumb nervously twitching against his seam. "Looking at a major capital return by the end of the month." Tristan lingered for a second too long, his eyes flicking subtly toward the heavy brass dial of the wall safe behind Alistair's desk before quietly exiting the study. The moment the oak door clicked shut, Alistair's demeanor shifted. He picked up his reading glasses and leaned toward the tea mug he didn't drink. Instead, Alistair dipped the tip of a clean silver letter opener into the warm liquid, brought it up to his light fixture and examined the bead. Floating on the surface was an almost microscopic oily rainbow film, a telltale sign of dissolved triazolam, a potent, odorless prescription sedative. "Subtle," Alistair murmured into the quiet room. "Too subtle for an amateur." Alistair stood up, pulled on a pair of fine cotton archiving gloves, and walked to his wall safe. As a 35-year probate judge, Alistair maintained strict physical security protocols. He placed a microscopic smear of clear silicone grease across the hairline seam of the dial every time he locked it. The grease seal was broken. Alistair rotated the dial, unlocked the heavy iron door, and pulled out his primary estate dossier. He opened the blue leather folder containing his living trust and the original codicil, the legal amendment to his will. To an ordinary observer, the document inside looked untouched. But Alistair's practiced eye spotted the anomalies instantly. First, the alignment of the top staple holes on the second page was off by less than half a millimeter. The document had been unstapled and rebound using a commercial desk stapler. Second, the paper weight of the second page was 24-pound linen bond, whereas the original probate document had been executed on 28-pound heavy archival cotton. And third, the text of the newly inserted second page contained a horrifyingly specific clause. Section 4.2, Emergency Asset Liquidation. In the event that the grantor, Alistair Montgomery, experiences an acute medical incapacitation, primary power of attorney shall immediately vest in my son-in-law, Tristan Thorne. Said attorney in fact is hereby authorized to execute a quick sale transaction of the real property situated at Sandia Foothills Drive for a cash sum not less than $500,000 to satisfy emergency medical and care obligations. Alistair lowered the document onto his desk. His heart rate remained completely steady. Tristan hadn't just spiked his tea with a sedative to make him look frail. He had forged a fraudulent codicil and set up a legal mechanism to sell Alistair's $950. A stayed out from under him while he was drugged in a hospital bed. Alistair slowly closed the folder, his steel gray eyes narrowing into 2 icy points of absolute focus. Tristan thought he was playing a high-stakes game of quick money against an aging, gullible old man. He had no idea he had just submitted a forged document into the courtroom of a man who had spent 40 years breaking men for doing the exact same thing. The dim light of the Albuquerque sunset stretched across the study floor, casting long, stark shadows over the polished mahogany. Alistair Montgomery did not hesitate. The courtroom of his mind was already in session, and the discovery phase had begun. First, he handled the contaminated tea. Using a sterile glass vial from his antique medicine chest, Alistair carefully decanted 3 fluid ounces of the spiked chamomile tea. He sealed the rubber stopper, labeled it with the precise date and time, and secured it inside his hidden floor safe beneath the Persian rug, a secondary vault known to no one but himself. Next came the document forensic analysis. Alistair laid the forged codicil under a high-magnification desktop loupe. Tristan, You arrogant fool, Alistair whispered, a cold, dry smile touching his lips. Tristan had used a high-end laser printer to mimic the font of the original 2018 codicil, Times New Roman, 12 point. But he had committed a cardinal error known to every veteran probate examiner: toner banding and microprint grid tracking. Modern color laser printers embed invisible, yellow microdot tracking codes onto every printed page, encoding the printer's serial number and exact timestamp. Alistair grabbed a small ultraviolet keychain light and clicked it on over the second page. Under the 405 nanometer beam, a subtle, repeating grid of yellow microscopic dots flared to life across the margin. Alistair grabbed his smartphone and captured 4 razor-sharp, macro-lens photographs of the UV pattern, the misaligned staple perforations, and the paperweight seam. He then pulled out a sleek, black USB drive, an encrypted device given to him by a former colleague at the State Bureau of Investigation, and plugged it into his workstation. Within 5 minutes, he had configured a hidden, buttonhole microcamera disguised as an antique brass drawer pull on his bookcase. It provided a crystal-clear 4K wide-angle view of both his study desk and the wall safe, complete with real-time cloud backup to a secure server in Santa Fe at 7:30 p.m. Alistair called his longtime friend and former chief investigator for the Bernalillo County District Attorney's Office, Marcus Vance. "Marcus," Alistair said into the receiver, his baritone steady and low. "I need a rush forensic chemical screen on a 100 milliliter liquid sample, along with a latent fingerprint dusting on a physical sheet of 24-pound linen bond." "Alistair?" Marcus's gravelly voice rasped over the line. "What's going on?" "You sound like you're preparing an indictment." "I am," Alistair replied. "A member of my household has committed document forgery, attempted pharmaceutical poisoning, and conspiracy to liquidate trust assets. I want the chain of custody kept strictly off-book until I issue the summons." A heavy pause hung over the line. "I'll be at your side gate in 20 minutes, Marcus said without asking another question. 30 minutes later, the sample and the forged document, handled strictly with cotton gloves, were handed off through the shadowy courtyard garden. With the physical evidence locked in motion, Alistair sat back down in his armchair and picked up his Mont Blanc fountain pen. It was time to write the script for the preliminary hearing. He drafted a short formal letter printed on his official retired judicial stationery. Notice of Special Trust Audit and Profitee Appraisal to Helena Montgomery and Tristan Thorndate, Tuesday. July 28th, please be advised that a mandatory family financial review will be conducted at the residence tomorrow at 10 a.m. regarding the emergency medical provisions of the Sandia Foothills estate. Alistair folded the letter, placed it on the dining table, and walked back to his study. He knew how Tristan's desperate mind worked. When Tristan saw the words "emergency medical provisions" on official judicial letterhead, he would assume the sedative in the tea was taking effect, making the old judge paranoid about his failing health, driven by his $150,000 gambling debt and the impending Vegas deadline. Tristan wouldn't wait for a slow, natural decline. He would bring his co-conspirator, the crooked real estate investor he had lined up for the quick cash buyout, directly into Alistair's study to execute the fraudulent deed. Alistair leaned back, turned off his desk lamp, and let the darkness of the desert night wrap around him. "Step into my courtroom, Tristan," the judge murmured into the dark. "The gavel is about to fall." The Tuesday morning sun rose over the Sandia crest, painting the sky in violent shades of crimson and orange. Inside the Montgomery estate, an eerie, heavy quiet reigned. At 9:30 a.m., Tristan stepped into the hallway, his face flushed with nervous anticipation. He had spent the night tracking live odds on his sports betting app, watching his remaining credit line evaporate. His Las Vegas bookie had sent a final text message at dawn: 12 p.m. today, or we visit your family. Tristan knocked softly on the study door. "Judge, are you awake?" Silence answered him. Tristan slowly pushed the oak door open. Alistair was slumped forward in his heavy leather armchair, his head resting awkwardly on his chest, his breathing slow and shallow. On the mahogany desk sat the half-empty mug of spiked chamomile tea. A sinister, triumphant grin broke across Tristan's face. The sedative had worked perfectly. The old man was completely out, incapacitated just enough to look like he was suffering a sudden neurological decline. Tristan pulled his phone from his linen suit jacket and dialed a local number. "He's down, Victor. Get up here right now with the closing notary. We're executing the quick sale deed today." 10 minutes later, a sleek silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Out stepped Victor Vance, a notorious predatory real estate flipper known in Albuquerque for buying distressed properties from desperate or incapacitated owners at 40% of their market value. Beside him was a young, nervous-looking woman holding a notary stamp and a leather briefcase. Tristan met them at the front entrance, ushering them quietly down the corridor into the study. Helena was away in town running errands, leaving the house completely open for their operation. "Is the codicil verified?" Victor asked in a raspy, low voice, as he set his leather folder on Alistair's desk. "Page 2 gives me full power of attorney in the event of medical incapacitation." Tristan whispered eagerly, pointing to the slumped figure of his father-in-law. "Look at him. He can barely keep his eyes open. He's incompetent. I'm signing the quick sale agreement for 500,000 cash right now." Victor pulled out a 5-page emergency warranty deed, spreading it across the desk beside the forged codicil. "Sign on line 3 as attorney, in fact. My notary will stamp it. And I'll wire the first 150,000 to your Las Vegas escrow account within 20 minutes. Tristan's hands trembled with frantic excitement as he grabbed a pen. 500,000. I'm clear. I'm finally clear. He lowered the pen tip to the paper. Section 304 of the New Mexico Probate Code, a deep, thunderous baritone echoed through the room, requires that any instrument transferring real property under a power of attorney must be supported by an untampered, certified original document. Tristan's heart stopped. The pen froze a millimeter above the signature line. Alistair Montgomery slowly straightened his spine in the leather armchair. He raised his head, his steel-gray eyes crystal clear, sharp, and blazing with cold, unyielding authority. There was not a single trace of drowsiness in his posture. Victor gasped, taking an instinctive step back. "What the hell? You said he was incapacitated." "Judge," Tristan stammered, his face turning ashen as his knees began to buckle. You drank the tea. I don't drink tea prepared by men who owe 6-figure gambling debts to Las Vegas bookies, Tristan," Alistair said, his voice ringing through the high-ceilinged study like a judicial decree. Alistair reached out and calmly pressed a hidden button underneath his desk frame. The oak double doors behind Victor and the notary swung open. Stepping into the study was Marcus Vance, accompanied by 2 uniformed detectives from the Albuquerque Police Department and a senior prosecutor from the State Attorney General's office. Tristan backed away until his spine hit the wall, his chest heaving in absolute panic. "Judge, please, it's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to secure your medical funds. Save your testimony for the grand jury, Mr. Thorne," Alistair said, standing up to his full, imposing height and looking down at his son-in-law with icy contempt. The trap had closed tight. The court was officially in session. The study fell into an absolute, suffocating silence. Outside, the harsh desert sun beat against the sandstone floor, but inside, the air was as cold as a mountain vault. Victor Vance, the predatory real estate flipper, immediately slammed his leather briefcase shut and backed toward the door. "I had nothing to do with this." "This man told me he had valid legal power of attorney." "Stand where you are, Mr. Vance," Detective Rivera of the Albuquerque Police Department commanded, stepping into his path. "You're in the middle of an active felony crime scene." Alistair Montgomery walked slowly around his mahogany desk, holding a thick blue legal folder. He set it down directly beside the forged codicil and the spiked tea mug. "Let the record reflect." Alistair spoke, his voice carrying the calm, rhythmic weight of a judge reading a death sentence. That at 9:42 a.m., suspect Tristan Thorne attempted to execute a fraudulent real estate conveyance using a forged codicil, while attempting to render the property owner incapacitated via chemical means. Tristan collapsed onto his knees, his hands trembling as he looked up at Alistair. "Judge, please think of Helena. Think of the kids. If I go to prison, it'll ruin them." "You didn't think of Helena or your children when you poured triazolam into my tea." "Tristan," Alistair said, his eyes utterly devoid of pity. "Nor when you forged my signature to steal their future inheritance to pay off your Las Vegas bookies." Alistair turned to Marcus Vance, who nodded and pulled a tablet from his coat. At 10 minutes ago, Marcus reported, the crime lab completed the microchemical analysis on the T sample provided by Judge Montgomery. It contained 40 milligrams of liquid triazolam, 4 times the clinical dosage. Furthermore, latent fingerprint sweeps on the second page of the forged codicil yielded a 99% match to Tristan Thorne. Marcus touched the screen, and the wide-angle video feed captured by the hidden camera in the bookcase played in crisp 4K audio and video. Tristan's own voice echoed loudly across the study. He's down, Victor. Look at him. He can barely keep his eyes open. He's incompetent. I'm signing the quick sale agreement for 500,000 cash right now. Tristan let out a strangled sob, burying his face in his hands. The evidence was pristine, undeniable, and completely bulletproof. Detective Rivera, Alistair said, turning to the lead officer. You have physical evidence of attempted first-degree poisoning, felony forgery of a legal instrument, and grand larceny conspiracy. Detective Rivera pulled out a pair of heavy steel handcuffs, stepping over to Tristan. Tristan Thorne, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. As the cold steel clicked around Tristan's wrists, the front door opened, and Helena walked into the corridor holding a grocery bag. She stopped dead in her tracks, staring in utter horror at her husband in handcuffs, surrounded by police officers and her father. Dad? Tristan? What is going on? Helena gasped, her eyes brimming with tears. Alistair walked over to his daughter, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. It's over, my dear. The parasite in our home has finally been removed. Alistair looked down at Tristan, who was being hauled to his feet by Detective Rivera. You thought an old judge was an easy mark. Tristan, Alistair said, his voice echoing through the grand hallway one last time. You forgot that in this house, justice is never off duty. A month had passed since the morning the Albuquerque police cruisers lined the driveway of the Sandia Foothills estate. The violent desert heat of midsummer had begun to give way to crisp, cool autumn evenings, painting the mountain peaks in shades of deep violet and gold. Inside the study, the heavy smell of stale tea and betrayal was gone, replaced once again by the clean scents of beeswax polish, fresh mountain air, and old leather. Alistair Montgomery sat at his mahogany desk, reviewing the final decree sent over by the Bernalillo County Probate Court. Beside him sat Helena, holding a warm cup of coffee. Her face, once clouded with grief and shock, now wore a quiet, resilient calm. The fast-track divorce papers have been finalized, Dad, Helena said softly, sliding a signed document across the desk. Tristan waived all rights to any marital property custody claims or financial support as part of his plea deal. And his trial date? Alistair asked, adjusting his reading glasses. Set for November, Helena replied. With the 4K video recording, the latent fingerprints on the forged codicil, and the toxicological evidence of the triazolam, his public defender advised him to plead guilty to charges of attempted felony poisoning and forgery of a legal instrument. He's facing a mandatory 8 to 12-year sentence in the New Mexico State Penitentiary. Alistair gave a single, slow nod. There was no joy in his expression, only the quiet satisfaction of a man who had seen the scales of justice balanced once again. The Las Vegas bookies he owed money to have been fully served with permanent court injunctions, Alistair added, placing his Mont Blanc pen back into its stand. Their illegal debt operation was flagged to federal prosecutors. They won't be coming anywhere near this family or this property. He stood up and walked over to the French doors leading out to the courtyard garden. Down in the sunny patio, his 2 teenage grandchildren were sitting at the wooden table, working on their high school project, their laughter echoing softly across the red sandstone walls. Helena walked up beside her father, resting her head gently against his shoulder. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind, Dad. How I brought a man like that into our lives. Greed is a patient predator, Helena, Alistair said gently, wrapping an arm around his daughter. It hides behind charming smiles and tailored suits until it sees a moment of weakness. You loved your family and trusted your husband. There is no shame in that. The shame belongs entirely to the man who abused that trust. Alistair pulled a newly executed blue folder from his drawer and handed it to her. This is the updated Sandia Foothills Irrevocable Living Trust, Alistair explained, his baritone voice steady and warm. The estate is locked behind a tri-party judicial guardianship. No single individual, not even myself, can alter the conveyance clauses without independent probate oversight. This house, the land, and the funds belong to you and the children forever. Helena opened the folder, seeing her children's names printed cleanly under the primary beneficiary lines. Tears welled in her eyes as she hugged her father tightly. Thank you, Dad. At. The late afternoon sun beamed through the glass, casting a golden light over the study desk, where the heavy brass gavel sat resting on its oak block. Alistair looked out at the Sandia Mountains, standing tall and unyielding against the desert sky. At. A lifetime spent presiding over the law had taught him many things, but one truth stood above all rest. Men may attempt to forge reality, manipulate trust, and cheat fate, but a house built on truth and defended by an unyielding spirit will stand forever. At. The case was officially closed, the court was adjourned, and the judge's bench remained unbroken.